transportation controls, or transport controls. We kind of introduced that last time at the end of our lecture, just to kind of refresh you. Transport controls kind of take it from where packaging is a very critical part, and that's why we spend a lot of time on packaging. That is where it starts. That's where transportation safety starts, is selecting the correct packaging for what you have and using it properly and adhering to the restrictions that are placed on particular packaging versus your radioactive material. What's the difference between packaging and package from DOT standpoint?
Package includes what's inside.
Okay, packaging is what?
The packaging is just what's in. The package includes what's in.
Okay. Packaging is the material used to contain it, to hold it, the container that it ships in, if you want to think of it that way. Package is that with the contents in the process or as offered for transport. It's an important distinction you need to keep in your mind when you're reading regulations. And also I would suggest that you keep that in your mind when you're taking your test. Because that is it's not a trick question, but it's an important distinction. Package versus packaging.
Could you repeat it, please?
I'm sorry?
Could you repeat what you just said about
The package is the total deal. It's the box with all the internal cushioning and dividers and whatever else is needed, as well as the communications that are attached to it, along with the contents. That's the package. Packaging is the cardboard box and the styrofoam and whatever else goes into making up that packaging. That answer that for you?
Got it.
So, while packaging is really important, there are some other controls that are there to ensure that that package arrives safely. These controls, we've got listed here, and we're going to talk about most of them in detail. There's a thing called Transportation Index, there's a thing called Criticality Safety Index, dose rate limits, contamination limits. Most of those we've already discussed in Lecture 3, Control Use and Handling of Radioactive Material, when we talked about receiving radioactive material. There's also some exclusive use provisions as well as use of close transport vehicles that ensure proper transportation controls are accomplished. As far as exclusive use, is just what it says. It's sole use by a single consignor of a conveyance, and a conveyance is nothing more than the vehicle that is being transported, for which all initial, intermediate, and final loading and unloading are carried out in accordance with the direction of the consignor or consignee. What that says is that the exclusive use, it's contracted for that purpose. The initial opening and the final opening and all stops in between are under control of the consignor and or consignee. The consignor is the person that is paying for it, if you will, contracting for it. Consignee is the person that is doing the contracting out. It may even be the person on the other end that's receiving it. That's what exclusive use means. The consignor and the carrier, so the person signing it up, doing the shipping, if you will, the shipper, that's the person that owns the material, and the carrier, that's the person carrying it, must ensure that any loading or unloading is performed by personnel that have the proper radiological training, and that there are resources appropriate to the safe handling of the material available. So there's a little bit, quite a bit of responsibility that goes with it. As far as an exclusive use. Some more requirements there. There will be specifics, and what you need to take away from this is that there are specific written instructions for the maintenance of that exclusive use shipping controls. And that includes the surveys and instructions that go with the shipping paper information provided to the carrier. The truck driver may just be a truck driver, but he has to have had specific training on hazardous material transport. And when he assumes responsibility for that load, he doesn't assume ownership of it, but he assumes responsibility for it during transport. There are specific instructions provided to him by that person doing the shipping, and those are spelled out in regulations. So that's just a little bit on the exclusive use part of this. We'll kind of take that the last one first, as far as transport control. Now we're going to look at the transportation index. Any questions on exclusive use and kind of the responsibility levels there? I guess is really what the main thing is that you want to take away, and what exclusive use really means. Yeah.
In transportation business, is the difference between contract and common carrier a concern?
It's not a concern, but it is stipulated. The common carrier, you're talking about like FedEx and UPS and those types?
Yeah, it could be.
Yeah.
The way I understand, a common carrier can be shipping other things besides radioactive material. Its contract carrier would only be contracted with the consignor to ship radioactive material only for that consignor, if I understand the definition right.
Yeah, if say FedEx, for example, if they were going to ship radioactive material exclusive use, then whatever vehicle they designate is the exclusive use vehicle, and there can be no other use for it. They would be a contract shipper in that case, or a contract carrier in that case, but they would be signed on as an exclusive use carrier. Nothing else could be shipped with it if they are calling themselves exclusive use. And that's a key term, exclusive use. If it's used, then all of these restrictions plus the ones we're getting ready to talk about apply.
So it means the same as what we previously defined exclusive use as still?
I'm sorry?
This exclusive use, when we talked about exclusive use earlier, we were talking about, it means the same
It's the
thing.
same thing, same term. Yeah, we're just kind of revisiting it in a little bit more depth here. And we've got some more to add to it here in a little bit. Good questions. Exclusive use in radioactive or hazardous material shipping means something very specific, and that's why we spend the time with it. And plus, it's where most of your most facilities will use exclusive use shipments. That's the majority of what they do. Transportation index. The dose rates associated with radioactive material are controlled. Okay, it makes sense that we do that. And the way we do that, in part, is through the use of this thing called transportation index. And it's common to see it used as TI, transportation index. That is, the purpose of it is to control the radioactive material shipments from a exposure control standpoint to ensure proper handling. What is it? It's a dimensionless number, no units, but it restricts the number of radioactive material packages that can be accumulated on a conveyance or in a storage area. Each package, that's the packaging with the contents, each package has a TI determined, and then the total cumulative TI for the shipment is determined, and those two together work to stipulate safe handling and storage controls. But it is a dimensionless number. Where does it come from? It comes from multiplying the maximum radiation level in millisieverts per hour at 1 meter by 100. Now let me caution you. The DOT regs are written in SI units. So all the definitions are given in terms of the SI units. But usually you'll find a little parenthetical that tells you what the English equivalent is. For example, here, If we take the dose rate at 1 foot in MR per hour, millirem per hour, that will be the TI. So we don't have to do any multiplying, because millisieverts times 100 is equal to millirem. That's the conversion. So while it may seem a little confusing, DOT regs are in SI units. And that's why they have to express it this way. Because at one time it was not in SI. And so now they have to normalize everything back to millirem. But here it is. The TI, by definition, is the maximum radiation level in millisieverts per hour taken at 1 meter multiplied by 100. Or it's the highest MR per hour, millirem per hour at 3.3 feet. And it's without the units. Same number. It's always rounded up to the nearest tenth, except when you have between 0.0 and 0.05. And if you have something that's in that range, you can take it and record it as a 0. It is without units, and it's recorded as TI on shipping papers and radioactive material labels. There's 2 places that TI is recorded: shipping papers and labels. And we're going to talk about shipping papers in detail and also labels in detail, so you'll know where it gets recorded. Okay.
Okay, my RO20 measures in milligrams. So if I have a background, I just subtract my background from that number, and that would be my TI number, or just whatever my RO20 that's.
Yeah, you take your package, you back up a meter. What's my dose rate at 1 meter on my RO20, millirem per hour? Whatever that reads, that is my TI.
Okay.
If it reads between 0.0 and 0.05, then I'm going to record it as 0. Everybody catch that? For non-exclusive use, okay, this would be the common carrier scenario. For non-exclusive use, the TI from a single package cannot exceed 10. So there is an upper limit for non-exclusive use of 10 on any single package. So what's the max dose rate at 1 meter?
10 millirem. 10 millirem per hour.
10 millirem per hour. On non-exclusive use package, 10 millirem per hour because of the maximum TI of 10. As far as the sum, the total that could be on conveyance, as far as total on a non-exclusive, you cannot exceed 50. So you can take each of your packages, you read it at 1 meter, read the next one at 1 meter, read the next one at 1 meter, you add up what those all equal as far as your TI, and it cannot exceed 50 on any single conveyance. And you can see there's that this is for everything except for sea and aircraft. When it's transported exclusive use, there is no limit on the TI, on the sum of the TI on a single conveyance. So if I've picked a carrier that's going to ship toilet paper at the same time that it ships my radioactive packages, then I'm limited to 10 on any single package or 50 for that total load. If I ship it just strictly, I've contracted with this person, exclusive use and nothing else is going to go in there, it's not going to stop anywhere between here and unloading, then I can go, there is no limit. There is no limit. As far as TI. As far as the TI is concerned. There are some dose rate limits for exclusive use, and we'll talk about those. Now, I'm going to put the air up here. I'm not really too concerned about you remembering it, just knowing that there are different ones for air and sea transport. Give you a feel for how it varies. Provisions for shipments on air, on a passenger carrying aircraft. They make a distinction between a cargo aircraft and passenger. Each single package on the aircraft has a TI no greater than 3. Right off, it ought to hit you, okay? Lower dose rates because it's on a passenger aircraft. The combined, no greater than 50. So you still have that 50 upper limit for a combination on the aircraft. But any individual one can't read more than 3 MR per hour at 1 meter. If it's on a cargo aircraft, single package, TI no greater than 10. And total on the cargo, no greater than 200. And it gets even a little bit more picky when you go to seagoing vessels or water vessels. If you're really interested in what they are, they're at this link here. It's a lot of, if it's this configuration, then this, and if it's that, then it's that, and if it's not that, then it's this. And you don't need to know all that. Just know that there's different restrictions for air and for vessels, seagoing vessels. Packages must be stowed at distances prescribed. Sir? In areas that are not occupied by people. And there are tables specific to the individual transportation means that are adhered to.
It was a long break. What regulation are these from? 49 CFR?
49 CFR.
Okay.
49 CFR. Transportation, DOT. Now, a little graphic representation of the TI determination. You've got to survey it on all sides. And on the side with the highest dose rate, you back off 1 meter and determine what that dose rate is at 1 meter. If you're reading out in millirem per hour, then that's your TI. If you're reading out in millisieverts per hour, you multiply that by what? 100. That's your TI. Questions on TI? Yeah.
TI is pretty much millirem per hour.
No, TI is unitless. You just drop the units.
It's basically millirem per hour, just don't call it millirem per hour.
Right.
You're talking about a package.
It's unitless because it's a cumulative thing. When we start talking about the cumulative totals that are allowed, the units don't really do you any good. David?
When you were talking about rounding up the nearest 10, so if you had like 1.11, you would just go for 1.2? Or?
Well, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Regular rule, math rules don't apply there. Don't tell them I said that all in math. Do you have a question? I thought I saw that in. Okay. Any other questions on TI? All right, let's look at the criticality safety index. And it is just what it sounds like. It applies to fissile material. And this is in addition to the TI. So you still have to determine the transportation index, but if it's fissile material, then you also need to come up with the criticality safety index. It's dimensionless. It's rounded up to the next tenth. So far, so good. It's used to provide control over accumulation of packages, overpacks, or freight containers. Obviously, by its name, criticality safety index, one of our issues here is criticality. We don't want that happening. And so it would make sense that you limit the number of packages or the total quantity of fissile material in any one particular space or location. And that's what the CSI does for you. It's determined in accordance with the instructions that are provided here. I'm not going to require you to know that, but it is determined based on the grams of fissile material. And that's plutonium 239, 241, uranium-233, and uranium-235. But it is a quantity or a value that must be determined if you're dealing with any of those isotopes. Basically, and here's what you do need to know, for an overpack or a freight container, the sum of the criticality safety indexes of all the fissile material packages contained within that conveyance are used in determining the limits that we have to apply. Except for exclusive use, the CSI for any package or overpackage may not exceed 50. So in this case, your max is 50 for CSIs on non-exclusive use. Can you ship fissile material non-exclusive use? Yes, you can. In very small quantities. If it is greater than 50, then it has to be shipped exclusive use.
So it's not measured in a dose rate, it's measured in grams, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's a, if you go to that section that had the link to it, there's actually 3 sections there. It takes you through determining based on the isotope or mixture of isotopes, the weight of each individual one as compared to the overall weight. And it's a little bit of an equation to go through and determine what it is.
We don't have to know that yet, then?
No, you don't have to know that. But I would hope that if I gave you the part of the regulation that tells you how to do it, you could probably do it. For non-exclusive use of fissile, except on vessels, the total sum of CSIs may not exceed 50, which is said. For exclusive use, the total sum cannot exceed 100. So you have 50 and 100 for CSI. Non-exclusive versus exclusive. There's also a limit for temporary storage during transport. The total CSI in any storage location should not exceed this 50. And the packages have to be spaced at least 20 feet apart. Separation so that you don't get critical mass in one location. So as far as storage, 50 CSI max, and at least 6 feet, or 6 meters, 20 feet between packages. Questions on CSI? Okay. The radiation limits are pretty much repeat what we've talked about before. We'll talk about them again just very quickly to make sure we're good with them. Accepted packages. Accepted packages have a limit of 0.5 millirem per hour. That's 0.005 millisieverts per hour. And that's considerably lower, such that the safety factor is increasing. The limits for non-accepted packaging. Packages are restricted surface reading not to exceed 200 millirem per hour, and a transportation index not to exceed 10. Contact, 200 millirem per hour max, 10 millirem per hour at 1 meter, which would be the TI. That's for non-accepted packages. So what we're talking about is high bay and above. Or actually, IPs and above, industrial packaging and above. which would be IP, Type A, Type B package. Now, that was all non-exclusive use, and they are all, in fact, all these limits are implemented for safety purposes to minimize significant doses. Also, the level of training required for individuals dealing with non-exclusive use packages versus exclusive use packages. But it is there for personnel safety reasons. So that an individual dock worker, say, can handle these packages all day long and not really pose any risk. As far as non-exclusive package radiation limits, go back to what we were talking about. This summarizes it for you. The package, and this is non-accepted, okay? It is type or industrial package going up. 200 milligram per hour maximum on any surface, so you have to survey all the surfaces, find your maximum, and then back off 1 meter, and that gives you your transportation index. Now, I'll caution you here, it doesn't happen very often, but it can, just simply because of configuration, geometry inside the package, depending on what it is. Don't fall into the trap of thinking that your 10 meter or your maximum 1 meter reading is always on the same side as where that max dose rate is. It should be. In most cases, it will be. But always check all sides, regardless of what your highest contact is. So you do your 1 meter reading, that's your TI, and 200 milligram. And this is for non-exclusive use package. Also, while I got you here, you can see that the radioactive labeling, we're going to talk about labeling it individually here in a little bit, but whenever you're placing labeling on a package, it goes on opposite sides, one on opposite sides, just such that 2 sides will be marked, that it would be on a side that would not be covered up if it were stacked, so that it's visible. Questions about radiation levels for non-exclusive? Now, there's a couple other things to talk about here. You can ship them with higher dose rates if they're placed under additional controls, and here we're getting ready to get into exclusive use again. If it reads, surface reads, contact reading reads under 200 milligrams per hour, but the TI exceeds 10, then you need to place it under exclusive use shipment. In addition, if you have a greater than 10 TI and a surface contact reading greater than 200, then it's got to be exclusive use shipment, and it must be in a closed transport vehicle. You can't have exclusive use and have an open vehicle, a flatbed, for example. But if it's greater than 200 contact and greater than 10 TI, then it must be in a closed vehicle. You can also see that it's got to be secured in place. That means shoring or rigging that keeps the load where it is when it's placed in the conveyance, so that there's no shifting during shipment. And as we've already said, for exclusive use, there will be no loading or unloading operations between the point of origin and the point of delivery. Now, one note on closed transport. It can include an open transport if there are barriers that serve the side serve the function as the size on closed transport. In other words, if you erect a wire cage, for example, if you have a flatbed, you can erect a wire cage around to maintain distance from your article. and that would meet the requirement for a closed transport. It's proximity to the package what you're concerned with, people getting too close to the package. As far as vehicle radiation limits for exclusive use, the vehicle radiation limits are limited as follows. 200 milligram per hour at any point on the outer surfaces of the vehicle. We've had this discussion before. $10 milligram an hour at 2 meters from the outer lateral surfaces of the vehicle. And that does not include the top and the bottom of the transport. It's the lateral surfaces. Now, the 200 milligram an hour here does apply to the top and bottom, all surfaces. But the 10 milligram an hour does not. It only applies to the lateral surfaces of the vehicle. And then 2 milligram an hour in any normally occupied space, which would be the cab in most cases of a semi-trailer. There are some exceptions to that. Just know that they're there. I'm not going to require you to quote them. But basically, if you've got the driver under a radiation monitoring program and they have a TLD and they've had specific advanced training on rad worker training, then this 2 milligram an hour does not apply. But for our intents and purposes, 2 milligram an hour in occupied spaces. Steph, you look concerned about something.
Well, it just flexes under what conditions would the lateral surface, just to do a measurement on the lateral surfaces only, be acceptable? Why wouldn't you want to do like at any point on the outer surface?
Well, you do on contact.
Okay,
It's when you get to this 2 meter, 6 foot,
2 meters, 6 foot.
that
Okay.
you don't have to consider the top and the bottom. You only consider the sides.
Okay, got it.
They don't count on people jumping on top of the vehicle and the ground.
It's not a normal, and people don't walk by, you know.
Chevy Chase won't drive under
You
it.
can't get there unless they, huh?
Said Chevy Chase won't drive under it.
Well, yeah, hopefully not. Plus, I'm not sure if there's not 6 foot under
We already
the
have
transport.
It's not normal.
Okay,
Hopefully not. Did that help?
yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
Here's a graphic display. Again, exclusive use. And one thing we did not note, on the package itself, we can read up to 1,000 milligram per hour maximum on any surface on that. It's on the package. Now, on the exterior surface of the conveyance, bless you, 200 milligram per hour maximum contact on any outer surface, and that includes top and bottom. So you've got to survey that entire thing. You're looking for those limits. And that includes the top, so you get a ladder, and you climb up there with a safety rig. And then 10 milligram an hour maximum at 2 meters from the vehicle, only on the sides, excluding the top and the bottom. So only on the sides, front and back. And then finally, 2 milligram an hour maximum in any occupied space. And as you can see there, that'd be the cab of the truck.
The visual
Yes.
actually helps that.
In some of the shipping areas where they have where they just take the container and they run them, between the detectors, would that cover, like, be able to measure, take all the measurements simultaneously? See what?
You mean for shipping purposes? I don't know, I really don't know of any facility that has that capability. The monitors that come to mind when you mention that are the ones that are at the weight stations. And those, if those are checks.
Yeah.
They're there to check to see if you did your job. Are
Yeah.
you sending them anything that's out of spec?
but like in Charleston Harbor and some of those places,
Yeah.
you know, they've got to, you know, to check for radioactive material.
But you as a shipper, the only way to do the dose rating is manually. That's it. That's where you come in. That's why you get paid the big bucks. In the cold February morning and it's sleeting and you've got a shipment going out. So, Stephanie, you had one?
What's that? No, sir.
A question?
I was just saying the visual helped a lot better than the written part. So just,
Some people are visual learners. I am.
Are there limits to how long the driver's allowed to drive depending?
Not based on dose rate. The question was, are there limits on how long a driver can drive? And that's a great question. Not based on radiological concerns. There are transportation limits on how many hours a driver can log without an equivalent amount of rest and things like that. And some of that may be keyed toward hazardous material transport, but not radioactive material specifically.
But as far as them resting, they're just kind of sleep in the truck, so that would cause them to be there longer.
There is actually instruction to the drivers to the effect that I think it restricts their ability to use the sleeper. They can't sleep there. Unless they're under that exemption, where the drivers are monitored by their company on a TLD monitoring program, and then they've got to probably have an RWP and, you know, the whole 9 yards. They're under their own radiological control program. But even then, I would think that they would restrict them, not permit prolonged birthing times.
I know somebody that used to drive for Hitman, and they transport radioactive waste. He said they usually had 2 people in the car. They usually had at least 10 hours of sleep each. And there's all I picked his brain about it. He said there was all kinds of things, like all kinds of crap they had to do.
Oh, yeah.
They said there's always RPs out there surveying between every single load.
Yeah. Yeah, the driver on these exclusive use vehicles are not your normal semi-truck driver. I mean, they meet all DOT regular transportation requirements plus additional hazardous material. Other questions? David?
Did you say there was a difference between non-accepted and non-exclusive, or were they the same thing?
Non-accepted and non-exclusive,
Were those the same?
two different things.
Okay.
Not accepted, remember we were talking about classifications of packaging? We started with the accepted, which is the lowest level, basically very little controls and very low dose rates, 0.05 milligram per hour. When we're saying non-exclusive use, we're talking about the transport mode, the classification of the transport truck, whether it's geared just for radioactive material, which would be non-exclusive use, or exclusive use, geared just for radioactive material. Thanks for asking that clarification. Other questions? Okay. Moving, there's a graph here for you. I'm not going to go over it, but it's there. And it basically is a summary, puts everything into one place for the exclusive versus not exclusive, external transportation, CSI limits, everything. It's just kind of all in one place, so you take the time to digest that outside class. And if it helps, it's great. If not, don't look at it. That's radiation levels. Contamination levels. Limits apply to non-exclusive use. And these limits must not be exceeded, must not exceed the limits at the beginning of transport. But, I'm sorry, back up. We've got the non-exclusive use, and we'll talk about those here in a second. In exclusive use, you do have these limits, but on exclusive use shipments, the limits can be allowed to increase during the period of transport. Now, before you start thinking, well, that's not good. There's reason for it, and what it does is it's this phenomena of leaching. because on containers, especially stainless steel, I think I've talked to you about this before, you probably have heard it in some of your other classes, you can scrub the fire out of it, survey it, and it's clean. And you let it set for about 12 hours, 13 hours, come back and survey it, and it's contaminated again. And it's this thing called leaching. And there's some metals are very susceptible to it, stainless steel being one of them. And what it does is the contamination just gets down into the pores of the metal, and you may scrub the surface clean of it, but ultimately it just kind of bubbles up to the top. And so this allows for that, and that's why it's there. It can increase up to 10 times the limits during transport. And so when we look at the limits for exclusive use, just know that's at the beginning, and at the end it is allowed to be up to a factor of 10 higher. Non-exclusive use, this is the same one we looked at before. These are all equivalents. It's just expressed differently. And the D per M is assuming an efficiency of 10. That's a standard efficiency for most sprinklers. But any one of these is what you would need to know. And if you could, bless your hearts, I know some of you actually were able to spout all of them back. Way to go. But it tells you, recall that it's averaged over 300 centimeter square surface versus the standard 100 centimeter square. You do the smears over 300 centimeter square, and you reduce it down to an activity level per centimeter square, whether it's in becquerel, microcuries, or D per M. Looking at D per M, 220 for beta gamma emitters with low toxicity alphas, 22 for other alphas. Those are your two keystones for non-exclusive shipment. For exclusive use, you can see it's a factor of 10 higher. 2200 for beta gamma and low toxicity alpha, and then 220 for other alpha emitters. Those would be your limits.
Well, you did say at the beginning of the transport, exclusive use has to be the same as non-exclusive.
I'm sorry?
You said at the beginning of the transport, for exclusive use, they have to be the same as...
No. Same as non-exclusive use?
Yes, sir.
No. Two different sets. This is non-exclusive use. There's your limits. Okay. This is exclusive use. There's your limits. Now, what I did say, this is at the beginning of shipment.
Oh, and those can be multiplied by that.
So let's say you're receiving an exclusive use shipment, and their shipping papers and pre-shipment documentation shows that he was at 2100, and you do your smear and it's 3500. Well, that's okay. That's within that 10 times. Okay, you can go up to 10 times what you see here during transport, if it's due to leaching. Now, if you open that bad dog up and you see water leaking out, that's not leaching. That's a leak in transport. Your package has your packaging material is filled, and you've got something else going on. But if everything else looks normal and you do your survey and you say, okay, well, it's stainless steel, I'm within that 10 times, you would still report it greater than the limit, and then what you suspect to have happened, the leaching that may have occurred. Did that clear that up for everybody? And this is what I was just talking about. If that does happen, then you have to survey the material or the transport vehicle to make sure that it is not contaminated itself. In fact, that's got to be done anyway after it gets offloaded, after the radioactive material packages have been removed. Then you have to do a release survey of the transport. And if it is contaminated, then prior to being, if it's contaminated such that the surface is greater than 0.5 millirem an hour, then you have to take it out of service and decontaminate it. And it can't be returned to service until you're less than 0.5 millirem an hour. That's a lot of contamination. You probably would not return it to service until it was detected. Now, there is this exception here, and there are some vehicles out there that meet this requirement. If it is designated as being used for transporting Class 7 only, then you have these requirements. If it doesn't exceed 10 millirem an hour, and the exterior surface is less than 2 millirem an hour at 1 meter, then you're good. Now, I say there are some vehicles out there that meet this requirement, but again, I don't think you will see very many of them with these limits, unless we're talking about a Type B container, a shipping cask, and where there's only like 2 or 3 of those in existence, and the insides of them are normally contaminated anyway, and that really is where this limit applies. Those are designated radioactive material only transports. If an empty one gets up to these levels, then you have to take actions to decontaminate it. And if you have a vehicle like that, you've got to mark it, be stenciled for radioactive material use only, got to be at least 3 inches high, conspicuous place on the exterior of the vehicle. They have to be closed at all times other than loading and unloading. And as I said, if they get up above those limits, then you have to decontaminate it. And that's pretty much it as far as contamination and radiation limits. As far as transport controls. So we looked at TIs, CSIs, radiation levels, and contamination levels, and we've looked in terms of non-exclusive use and exclusive use for each of those cases. Concern yourself only with those things that deal with land transport. I'm not really, you don't need to remember air and sea and all that stuff. Just know that they are different. The next thing, and I think before we start this, we'll go ahead and take our break, is LSA and SCO shipments. We so far have been talking about shipment and concerning really any type of radioactive material, whether it's a Type A package or fissile material or whatever. We're going to focus now on LSA and SCOs because this is 90% of the shipments that you make or that are made. So there are some specific LSA and SCO requirements that you need to be aware of. So with that, let's take a 10-minute break. We'll start back up at 25 after. As I was saying, the LSA and SCO are the most common shipments that we make. There are some specific requirements for them, so we need to go through them. Just to recap, earlier we discussed the difference between the two. LSA implies that it deals with activity that is within the material, that's part of the material, whereas SCO, or surface contaminated object, implies that it's activity that's on a material. Even if it's internal to it, it's on the internal surfaces of the valve, for example. That's the distinction that's made between it. Oil specific activity and SCO. As it says there, the majority of shipments that are made originate in the fuel cycle, also from all kinds of medical research industries, also the academic communities, and that would be those universities that have research capabilities, possibly may even have a research reactor. The SCO category does address solid waste generated in the form of non-radioactive contaminated materials. It may be from some of the D&D projects that are going on. A lot of SCO type shipments coming out of those, the dismantling and decontamination projects, where they shut down a power plant. We've got a couple of students working at one up in La Crosse, Wisconsin. And, you know, I mean, when you start dismantling a power plant, it's been in operation for 50 years. The equipment, if it's a radioactive system, it's an SCO more than likely. I think the plants where they're working is a boiling water reactor. So that means all of the secondary system, all the steam side, everything, you know, all of that is surface contaminated objects, and it's going to be dismantled and it'll be shipped to some waste processing facility, I'm sure. But that would be under the SCO category. As far as transport requirements, there are unique requirements for them, and they are contained in this particular section of 49 CFR. The link's there for you to go check if you want to see the specifics of it. But basically, it limits the quantity of LSA material or an SCO in a single package, so that the external surface on the unshielded material does not exceed 1 rem per hour at 3 meters. So that's on the material that's in the package. And as you can see there, compliance does not allow you to take credit for shielding offered by the packaging. And so that's why the limit is on the material itself. You have to limit the quantity such that you do not exceed that 1 rem per hour at 3 meters. If it does exceed the 1 rem per hour at 3 meters, then you cannot ship it at LSA or as SCO. It has to go in a type B package for packaging it. So you just basically have exceeded the threshold limit for LSA and SCO. It has to go in type B package. And there are some other limits, as you can see, on SCO and LSA transport and conveyance. There's an activity restriction of 100 times the A sub 2 or A2 per conveyance. Applies to all SCOs and LSA 2 and 3 that fall into the combustible solids or in liquid or gaseous form. So any one of the physical forms really. So you've got a maximum activity, microcuries or becquerel. And there are some other requirements down here. I'm not too worried about this part down here, but there are some limits. And it's got to either be fissile or fissile accepted, which means very, very low level fissile. David?
What is A2?
That's the quantity. Remember, if A1, A2 quantities that we talked about as far as normal form and special form. It's used for a lot of different things. This is one of them. To define radioactive material, isotope or mixture of isotopes. It also places limits on type A packaging. It's A1, A2 by 8. And in this case, 100 times that is the activity level restriction for all SCOs and LSA 2 and 3. As far as contamination levels, the same limits apply that we talked about before, so those would convey. No new ones there. Now, there is a classification or a category, or I'm not sure the right term to call it. You can have what is called unpackaged LSA and SCO. And that is shipped without packaging, and it would be in some type of bulk quantity or bulk conveyance, such as a freight container, like a sealand, or a tank, or some other bulk container. And if you choose to do that, there are restrictions on that. As I said, I'm really more concerned with just knowing that you can ship unpackaged, and it really falls into bulk transport. Where you may run into to that would be maybe there are cases at times where you may have slightly contaminated some dirt on your establishment, and you're gone out there and dug it up, and it's LSA, low specific activity, such that you have to treat it as radioactive material. But you're not going to put fill up 55-gallon drums with it. You're not going to fill up boxes with it. They do have these huge, it looks more like industrial packaging, and that's really what it would be used for contaminated dirt like that, low level stuff. But that would be unpackaged LSA. It may be that there's an old tanker car that's used to receive some slightly contaminated water. It's got to be transported to some waste processing facility. That would be unpackaged LSA. And as you can see down here at the bottom, it's got to be exclusive use. It's not going to mix local unpackaged. Now, as far as other packaging for LSA and SCO, back up a minute. Accepted packages first. You can ship LSA and SCO accepted packaging, but only when it's in exclusive use and the quantity does not exceed the A2 quantity in each package. And it's interesting to note also that it's restricted to domestic transportation only. No international transportation is permitted for accepted packages of LSA and SCO. The packaging that's used in this case got to meet the general packaging design requirements that we talked about previously for DOT accepted packaging. As far as industrial packages, the IPs for LSA and SCO, you can see the correlation here between the LSA, type LSA, and the IP packaging that's used. Level 1 to level 1, 2 and 3 to levels 2 and 3. It's pretty straightforward. Liquid form does require more durable than solid, simply from the standpoint of leakage. And that's just an observation about the non-exclusive use LSA versus exclusive use. And this is just a table to bring all that kind of together as far as type of LSA and SCO versus exclusive use, non-exclusive use, and the IP packaging that's allowed. I'm not so concerned about you being able to tell me that for non-exclusive use LSA2 you use an IP2, but you need to understand that as the hazard level goes up with LSA 1 and 2 and SEO 1, or LSA 1, 2, and 3, and SEO 1 and 2, so must your packaging. It just elevates with the commensurate elevation of the type of shipment put together. As far as type A and B packages for LSA and SCO, for domestic use only, the DOT 7A type A packaging may be used. Type B, as I've alluded to several times, this is a very special classification. This is the one that's certified by the NRC on a per packaging basis. It has a certificate of compliance that goes with it. It's a pedigree. And so to use a type B packaging, you would use it for things that require type B packaging. And most LSA and SCO will not. But there may be times when you will want to, and if you do, you still have to meet all the requirements of the type B packaging, which can be considerable because it has quality assurance standpoints. It's got bolts to hold the lid on. There's torque value set points on those lid bolts. That's got to be observed by an independent party and signed off. And there's all kinds of things that go into using the type B package. So you're not going to use it unless you have to. And it's expensive too. That's what all this is saying. If the radioactivity in physical form of the LSA is to be shipped are such that it can be considered one of the authorized contents for a type B package, then you would use the type B package. Here is what you typically see for LSA SCO. This is the DOT type 7A. It can be either a type A packaging, IP 1, 2, or 3. Looks like a standard 55 gallon drum, but it has a pedigree behind it. You can have a metal box such as this. This is a B25 box. And it can be a type A packaging or an industrial packaging. And then here is that type B. It's shown here as a shielded LSA cask with a type A. A type B packaging would be just one step above this. You've seen it. We showed you, I think the picture we showed you was with the overpack on it. It's basically the economy class, if you will, and it only rates a type A. But it has IP2 and IP3 capabilities. This is usually what you'll see being used to ship LSA and SCO. This cask is normally used, what you would see this being used for is dewatered resins, maybe even with a liner in it. It has a liner. Solidified waste has undergone some solidification process. In here, the metal box and the drums, SCO type-wise material, the equipment. Give you an example. A lot of the maintenance that's done at power plants during outages are done by contractors. And the contractors are contracted out by their specialization on whatever they do. Let's say eddy current testing on a steam generator. There's companies that do that. On the side of the generator where they do the testing is the primary side, and so it's contaminated. So all the equipment stuff, I mean, these are $500,000 pieces of equipment that are contaminated. And they're used from place to place to place to place. So for shipping purposes, between outages, they would typically box them up in something like this or in a drum. And that's the way they'll ship their equipment. It will be shipped as SCO. And then this last one, intermodal container. Really depends on the contents and the conveyance and the packaging and all that stuff. It can be anywhere from an accepted all the way up to an industrial package. So those are the typical ones that are used. And I'm sure there's probably a variety of other ones that we've not talked about. Questions on LSA and SCO. Most commonly used classification for radioactive material shipments that you'll be involved with. All right, that was transport controls. We're going to shift gears now and move toward communications, hazardous material communications. Next major division in the discussion. Communications can be really anything that conveys something about the shipment, something about the content, something about the package. And it all falls under this category of hazardous material communications. If you look at levels of responsibility, the shippers do have the majority of the responsibility in accordance with 49 CFR. Part 172 of the 49 CFR lists all the communications that are required, and those are the ones that we're going to go over. It does require cooperation with the carriers. They also have specific responsibilities under hazardous material communications, and we'll talk about those as we get through this. It does require that we communicate all the specific hazards, and as part of the total system, we have a requirement to provide specific information, and that is what we're going to dig into. As I said, 49 CFR Part 172 has the communication requirements. It complements the basic safety things that we've talked about as far as the packaging and the package, the A1, A2 values, the transportation index, the CSI, all of that. Communications put on top of that. Hazardous material communications. Historically, you see the things that have been included. Proper shipping papers, package marking, labeling, and vehicle placarding. We're going to cover all of those. In recent years, especially since 9/11, we've added emergency response information that is required to be addressed, as well as hazmat employee training and also security plans. And we're going to just touch on those. Subpart A gives us the applicability of the regulations to either a shipper or a carrier. So if a shipper needs to know what his specific requirements or his specific duties are under the regs, then he would find that in Subpart A. Subpart B of 172 gives us a hazardous materials table, which I introduced to you last lecture period. It showed you some of the types of information that were there. Specifically, it is Part 101. 172.101 is the hazardous material table. And that table does prescribe requirements for shipping papers, for the marking, for the labeling, placarding, for all the requirements that are necessary as far as communications of the hazardous material. For each hazardous material listed, and it's a huge table if you'll recall when we went through it. It's arranged by alphabetical order, so when we start talking about radioactive material, we would go all the way down it to the R's, and that's where all the radioactive materials. But you can see what's listed. It gives the hazard class, gives a UN identification number, United Nations identification number, and the proper shipping name. Or it gives you directions on where to go to get the proper shipping name. The proper shipping name is one of those pieces of communications that it's got to be specifically as stated in the hazardous material table. Any deviation from that is a regulatory compliance issue. And so you've got to make sure that what you put down as proper shipping name is the proper shipping name. And that's just to let you know that if you get to the table, there's a lot of paragraphs, there's a lot of good information on there. It tells you how to use the table. And I'll leave that up to you to read all of that. But what we want to talk about now is the proper shipping name. They're based on the type of package that's used for the material. That's an important differentiation. Radioactive material, the hazard class first, right? That's class 7 radioactive material, obviously, but then it's based on the type of package that's used. If the packaging type matches the contents, then it's good. It's easy to select the proper shipping name. If you start mismatching and maybe using a higher rated packaging than what's needed, then you start running into some difficulties in selecting the proper shipping name because it is packaging based. And so you've got to be careful with that. And there are sometimes when you elevate the packaging because you want that added safety, which is nothing wrong. You can do that. You just need to make sure that you reflect that in your selection of the proper shipping name. And here's your options for addressing that. One is you can leave the package markings as is and the proper shipping name commensurate with that packaging. So in other words, if you select a type A packaging for a accepted quantity of material, you would just leave it labeled as and named as type A. You would just leave it. Or you can alter the markings that are on the package to be consistent with the contents. Those are the options that are available. As far as proper shipping names, I think I went to this and showed you last time, but here's the radioactive material ones. And I'll read through some of them. You can kind of get a feel for it. It's based on packaging. Radioactive material accepted package, empty packaging. Radioactive material accepted package, instruments and articles. Radioactive material accepted package, limited quantity of material. Radioactive material, LSA1, non-fissile or fissile accepted, and so on. Radioactive material, surface contaminated objects, SCO1 or 2, non-fissile or fissile accepted. You move on down here, type A. Radioactive material type A package, special form, fissile. For each one of those, there is a unique UN identifier number that has to match up with the proper shipping name that's selected. In the past, and I'm only going to point this out because you may see some packages even today with this on it. In the past, if you had a package that was not here, there were kind of default little names that would say, like at the end of the accepted package here, it would say radioactive material accepted package NOS. And that means not otherwise specified. So it was kind of a catch-all. If it didn't fall into one of those categories for accepted package, then you would select NOS. And so you'll see some of that on some of the packaging. But that's no longer accepted. So you would not want to use that as your proper shipping name in any case. So that's proper shipping name. Pretty simple, straightforward. Hazardous materials table based on the type of package that's being employed, or the type of package that it is, and with a corresponding unique UN number. The next one, hazard communications, is shipping papers. Shipping papers, you can think of it in terms of, if any of you are familiar with shipping at all, you've got a material manifest. This takes the place of the material manifest, shipping papers. The obviously, this information is needed so that the hazardous material can be properly handled. It's important to everybody that's involved with that movement. And its main function in addition to providing a means of accountability and accurate display of information, its main purpose is emergency response, such that if there's an event or an incident with that shipment, there is information readily available as to the contents of that shipment, so that the emergency response organization can respond properly and correctly and safely. Shipping paper description must include, ultimately, this information. Got to have the basic shipping description, the UN number that we talked about, the proper shipping name as it's written in that table, hazardous materials table, and the hazard class or division. As we've said, radioactive material is hazard class 7. You also need to provide the net quantity of the material by mass, or if you'll see here, this is one of those exceptions for class 7. Instead of the quantity of material by mass or volume, you provide the activity if it's radioactive material. And a little note there in italics tell you that usually for radioactive material, the only time you really need the weight or volume is for shipping freight charges. In addition, on the shipping papers, we have to have the letters RQ if it is a hazardous material. And by definition, radioactive materials is defined as hazardous material, and so it must have RQ listed. Now there is an Appendix A that you can go and look, and it has restrictions on the isotopes that are involved. Just for radioactive material, we use RQ because it is a hazardous substance. And then you need emergency response telephone number. We can talk about this a little bit later, but that's a 24/7 number that's got to be manned by someone cognizant of the shipment, the contents of the shipment, and the emergency response protocol in the event of an incident. Most organizations contract this out. There's a third party that provides this service, and they are provided the total shipping manifest and shipping papers for any shipment that you put on the road. They're notified when it hits the road. They're notified when it stops and arrives. But they usually provide that service, that 24/7 service. You can put other information on shipping paper besides this that we talked about, but you have to ensure that it's consistent with and does not cause confusion from the basic description. And unless you're otherwise instructed by the regs, any additional information that you choose to put on there has got to come after this standard information. So the standard information, again, was the UN number, the proper shipping name, class 7 for radioactive hazard class, the activity, and the letters RQ, and emergency response phone number. Now, there are some other information, bits of information that are usually provided for radioactive. One is the name of the radionuclide that's in the material. You can use the standard nomenclature, molybdenum 99, that's okay. If you have mixtures, there's this thing called a 95% rule. And most of your shipments from the facilities that you would be working at would be mixtures. So we need to kind of understand the 95%. This 95% we'll pick up later as far as describing how to calculate it, but basically you take the fraction of the isotope that's there and you add them all together, and determine a total activity there, or total contribution activity. And then 95% of that is all you have to report. So you pick those isotopes, starting with the highest, and add them up until you reach that 95% value. And those are the only ones you have to list. But we'll talk about that a little bit later. That's how we handle mixtures. Description of the physical and chemical form is usually listed. The activity for each package, and it must be in SI units. As I said earlier, DOT deals in SI because it is an international organization now. And so SI units are the appropriate. You can put the customary units, the English units, but they have to be provided in parentheses following the SI units. There are also, on the shipping papers, you're required to indicate what label has been attached. We'll hit this here, and we'll hit it again when we talk about labeling, but you've got to provide which label, and that's either a radioactive white 1, radioactive yellow 2, or radioactive yellow 3. Those are the three choices. And those are all based on a couple of things. We'll talk about that later. But you have to have this on the shipping paper, which label you put on it. If it has fissile material, then you have to put the words fissile accepted if the package is accepted. Otherwise, you have to have the CSI on it if it's not an accepted quantity. And then finally, for exclusive use, you've got to indicate that it is consigned as an exclusive use. Shipping papers have to say that. And we've got this, or if the descriptions on the paper are consigned as exclusive use, then the statement will be entered on only once on the shipping paper in a clearly visible location. Usually it's just in a little block that goes on the manifest that says exclusive use shipping. If it's a highway route control quantity, HRCQ, then you must also indicate that on the shipping papers. And it is usually placed up with the other information so that it's clearly visible. And with all that being said, effective January 1st this coming year, all basic shipping descriptions of hazardous material must be indicated on a shipping paper in the following manner. So they put a little structure to it. It's got to be the ID, proper shipping name, hazard class, and the packing group, which is not applicable to Class 7. So that's NA for us, for radioactive material. Which is really not much change from what we just described to you. This additional information is added and it's still required, as long, again, as it doesn't cause confusion. Here's some examples for you of the entry on a shipping paper. This is one box. You can see the UN number, the type of package, or the proper shipping name, radioactive material type B, U package. There's our hazard classification of 7, RQ. This is our weight, overall gross weight of the package, and then the isotope. Iridium-192 is a special form at this activity. There's our label that's attached to it, radioactive yellow 2. It has a TI of 0.6, And this number here is an optional number that, from our description standpoint, this is a U.S. identifier, whereas this is the UN, this is the U.S. And then our emergency contact information. What would you say this is, looking at that? What does that describe to us? We've talked about it several times, several different classes, including this one.
You know what it's for?
Now, what is it? What is it describing? It's a piece of material or equipment that you've been shown, at least pictures of it anyway. Does this help at Radium 192?
Radiography source.
What's that? It's a combination. Special form. What's special form tell you?
It's encapsulated.
It's encapsulated, right? Pretty high activity. .7 kilograms. That's pretty heavy too. Any thoughts?
Just a radiography camera thing.
Yeah. Radiography camera.
Okay, that's good.
It's a type B package, but that's exactly what it is. It's a radiographer's camera with the Radium 192 special form, type B package. Never camera. It's a lead. Slug of lead, titanium. Okay, here's another. Here's 3 drums. UN number, it is radioactive material LSA 2, waste class, or 7. 363 kilograms each. It has these isotopes. These are the ones that have to be listed. And this is probably an application of what the 95% rule is. These are the 3 biggest contributors. This is solid. It has elemental or inorganic solid and non-compacted solid debris and waste. And you can see the drums. The activity in each drum is listed. And then it tells you to look at the attached radio manifest. But here it is exclusive use shipment. And then the emergency contact number. Probably trash. Here's the 95% rule. Here's how that works. It's used in cases where you have a listing of a mixture of isotopes where you don't have to list each isotope that's in the shipment. You're talking about 20 or 30 isotopes. And you just simply don't need to list all of them. But the rule says here that if we have mixtures, the radionuclides, represented by small n, that must be shown on shipping papers and labels, gives you this legible section, must be determined on the basis of the following formula. Boom.
Yes, that's what I did.
Are you kidding me? Oh, come on. You know how to read this. This is the sum of the isotope of this one. And I've got, here, here's all your stuff. The small a sub I is the activity of the radionuclide in the mixture. How much of it is there? The A sub I is the A1 or the A2 value for that radionuclide from the regs, from the table. And what this says is that fraction, the sum of that fraction of that isotope, if it's greater than or equal to 9.95 times the sum of the totals. The N plus M is all the radionuclides in the mixture. And it's the activity versus the A1, A2 value. And so what you do, I've got a little table here that illustrates it. So if we consider the following shipment of normal form radioactive material with isotopic distribution is shown here. Here's our isotopic analysis. Here's our isotopes that are listed. Here's how much activity is represented by that isotope in the mixture. Here are the A2 values from 49 CFR for that particular isotope. Boom, 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 boom. So I take the activity that's present divided by the A2 value. Now, is A2 normal or special? It's normal form, that's correct. So I come up with this value. And then contribution for this one. Very low activity, there's my A2 value, and it's got that contribution, and so on. It's each isotope's contribution based on its A2 value. Then I take all of those fractions and I add them up, and I come up with 0.987. That's my sum. That's where I'm starting from. That's my mixture. That's this value here. Now, 95% of that gives me this value here, 0.937. So what I have to do is list the isotopes that will total up to that 0.937, or 95%. Okay? So if I take a look at my individual isotopes, the rule states that it's necessary to list the largest radionuclide contributors until that 0.937 level is reached. That's 95% of that sum. So if I look at that and pick out my top three, what's my highest contributor?
Cobalt.
Okay, cobalt 60. That's my highest contributor, right? 0.75 toward its A2 value. It's almost there. Okay, so that's one. What's my next highest? I'm sorry?
The last one.
What's the name of that last one?
That's our
Strontium 89. Okay? So I add those two together. I'm not quite at my 0.937. So I take my next one. What's the next one? Which one? Cesium-137. That's correct. All right, so now I add all those up, and I'm beyond my 0.937, but that's okay. I'm at 0.963. Those are the isotopes that I have to list on my shipping paper and on my label. All these other isotopes are present, but these are the only ones I have to list. It's worth noting that the highest activity is not always listed either. It's the ratio. It's the ratio toward that A1, A2 value. Okay? So it's not listed, it's not based on the total activity that's present. It's based on the total contribution toward reaching that A1, A2 value. Any questions? 95% rule. Now, as far as accepted packages, shipping papers are not required for accepted packages. However, you are required to provide this UN number that's on the package. And shipping papers for accepted packages are okay. You can fill them out, and most people do. Also note that if you're going by air, there's a statement that has to go on the air bill. That's required by the International Civil Aeronautics Organization and the International Air Transportation Association. I think that's what the two acronyms are. But unless it is an accepted package, the shipping paper has to have a certification statement on it. This is the shipper's certification. It has to appear on the paper that lists the required shipping description. It must be used for all hazardous materials except for those that can go by air. This is what it has to say. This is to certify the above named materials are properly classified, described, packaged, marked, and labeled, and are in proper condition for transportation according to the applicable regulations of the Department of Transportation. And if someone gets to sign that bad dog, it's usually not the technician. However, most organizations in their facility procedures will require the technician that is qualified under Radway shipping and a special qualification to indicate somehow. Usually there's a checklist that says, I have done this, and it'll include things such as proper classification, markings, labeling, and also it doesn't show on here, but placarding of the vehicle. So you do usually have to indicate somehow that you've done these prescribed steps and that you did it properly. You can have alternate verbiage, which is, here's an example of some alternate verbiage. And if it's going by air, you have to add this statement to it, and what you do is you delete the one that's not applicable. The shipment is within the limitations for passenger carrying / cargo carrying only. So you would cross out, if it's a passenger carrier, you'd cross out cargo. And if it's a cargo, you'd cross out passenger. Those are the shipping paper requirements. The next section we'll start is section 4, and that gets into marking, labeling, and placarding. Marking and labeling are two different things by definition in the regulations. So we need to talk about those. Placarding, again, is different than they are. They all do the same thing. They're all hazard communications, but they all have unique requirements and descriptions on how they're used. I would encourage you, as I said, I'll put out an assignment. I think probably what we're going to do is have you, if I can get in here and get the recording made, I'm going to go ahead and record the lecture, and we will have an in-class activity to see how well you did as far as reviewing the material. And we'll also